Jax's revenge domain. The manila envelope sat on my desk like a loaded weapon. Nothing special about it. Standard office issue, the kind you'd use for interdepartmental mail or expense reports. But what was inside those 3 printed pages would blow apart everything Precision Components Inc. had been telling its workers for the past decade. My name is Nicholas Patterson. I'm 49 years old, and until 72 hours ago, I thought I'd finally found a company that valued experience over politics. A place where my 8 years in the Army followed by 22 years grinding through manufacturing operations, safety protocols, and production efficiency might actually mean something. I was dead wrong, but let me back up to where this really started. 3 weeks earlier, I'd walked into Precision Components facility in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, ready to prove I deserved the position they'd offered me, Senior Operations Manager. The recruiter made it sound like the perfect fit for someone with my background, military discipline, then 2 decades climbing the manufacturing ladder. The company made precision parts for aerospace and automotive, about 280 employees, steady contracts, solid reputation. The salary offer was $68,000 annually, which wasn't spectacular but fair for the area. More importantly, it was close enough to my ex-wife's place that I could still see my kids regularly. After the divorce 2 years back, that mattered more than the money. Day 1 was the usual routine. Badge photo, system access, safety orientation, stuff I could do in my sleep after 2 decades in manufacturing. My supervisor, Steven Rodriguez, seemed competent enough, methodical guy who knew his numbers. He walked me through the 3rd floor offices, explained reporting structures, introduced me to the team. "You'll be working with some of our newer hires," Steven said as we passed a cluster of workstations near the windows. "Fresh talent we've been bringing in over the last quarter." Fresh talent turned out to be a bunch of recent college grads hired into positions that normally required 5 to 7 years of experience. One of them was Lucas Morrison, 26 years old, expensive clothes, confident handshake, the kind of easy smile that comes from never having doors slammed in your face. "Lucas, meet Nick Patterson," Steven said. "He'll be handling production oversight and efficiency protocols." Lucas just joined us 3 weeks ago as production supervisor. Production supervisor, same level as positions I'd worked 15 years to reach. "Where were you working before Precision?" I asked, making conversation. "This is actually my first real job," Lucas said, still smiling. "Graduated last spring, did some consulting work over the summer, started here in January. First real job, production supervisor." I kept my expression neutral. "Well, welcome to the real world," I said. The first week passed in the usual blur of learning systems, understanding workflows, figuring out who actually ran things versus who had the titles. Every company has its quirks, and Precision was no different. What was different was how often I found myself explaining basic manufacturing concepts to Lucas. "Hey Nick, quick question," he'd say, appearing at my desk with his laptop. "I'm trying to understand this efficiency variance report, and I'm not sure how to calculate the percentage differences. Or, can you look at this production schedule? My numbers don't seem right, but I can't figure out where I went wrong." Or, "What's the difference between cycle time and tack time again?" Each question was reasonable in isolation. Everyone needs help starting out. But the frequency and the fundamental nature of what he was asking started painting a picture I didn't like. This wasn't someone who needed clarification on Precision's specific procedures. This was someone who didn't understand the basic mechanics of the job he'd been hired to do. By the end of week 1, I'd walked Lucas through lean manufacturing principles he should have learned in any decent engineering program, explained OEE calculations that were industry standard, and essentially rebuilt 2 of his efficiency reports from scratch because his analysis made no mathematical sense. "You're a lifesaver," he said each time, like teaching him his job was just part of my natural responsibilities. Week 2 was when things got interesting. I'd come in early Tuesday morning to work on a complex efficiency model for our biggest client. The office was mostly empty, just a few other early birds scattered around. I needed historical production data going back 3 years. Steven had mentioned it would be in the shared operations drive, organized by project and fiscal period. I navigated to the drive, clicked through folders, found the client directory I needed. Inside was a subfolder labeled Archive 2019-2024. I clicked it, and my screen filled with dozens of files: production reports, client presentations, efficiency analyses, audit documentation. I scrolled through looking for the specific data I needed. Then I saw a file that didn't belong. Compensation analysis operations Q4 internal.xlsx. I should have closed it immediately, should have minded my own business. But the Army taught me one thing above all else: gather intelligence before you engage the enemy. And something about this file sitting where it shouldn't be, labeled with words like compensation and internal, set off every tactical instinct I'd developed over 8 years of military service. I clicked it. The spreadsheet loaded with employee names, position titles, departments, hire dates, years of experience, annual base salaries. I scrolled slowly, recognizing names, matching faces to numbers. Then I found my own entry. Row 42, Nicholas Patterson, Senior Operations Manager, Operations. Hired January 15th, 2024. 22 years experience. Annual base, $68,000. Exactly what they'd offered me, right in line with my expectations. I kept scrolling. 4 rows down, I saw it. Row 46, Lucas Morrison, Production. Supervisor, Operations. Hired January 8th, 2024. 0 years experience. Annual base, $85,000. The number sat there on my screen, black text on white background, absolutely undeniable. $85,000. 25% more than me for essentially the same level position. 0 years of experience. My hands went still on the keyboard. The office sounds faded into background static. $85,000. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood, but the data was too detailed, too precisely formatted. Names matched current employees. Hire dates aligned with when people had actually started. I clicked on Lucas's employee profile link. The system loaded his complete personnel file. Date of birth, March 12, 1998. Education, Bachelor of Science, Industrial Engineering, State University. Graduated May 2023. Previous employment, marketing intern, Morrison Industrial Holdings, June-August 2023. Certifications, none. Relevant experience, none. Reporting manager, Stephen Rodriguez. Special notes, executive referral, priority hire. Executive referral. I clicked the notation. A pop-up window appeared with additional details. Employee referred by CEO Harold Morrison. Approved for accelerated placement and premium compensation package in alignment with Strategic Talent Acquisition Initiative. Harold Morrison. Lucas Morrison, the CEO's son. This wasn't strategic talent acquisition. This was nepotism dressed up in corporate language, sanctioned at the highest level, hidden behind closed-door decisions and confidential compensation files that employees weren't supposed to see. And I, someone who'd spent 8 years learning discipline and leadership in the Army, then 22 more years building production systems and training teams, had been hired at a rate that was insulting. In the military, we had a saying, know your terrain before you advance. I wasn't advancing anywhere until I understood exactly what I was dealing with. I scrolled through the rest of the spreadsheet, cross-referencing names with faces I'd been learning. Over the past 2 weeks, the pattern became clear fast. Amanda Foster, $72,000 for a junior analyst position, 18 months out of college. Ryan Coleman, $78,000 as an associate supervisor, 24 years old. Both had the same notation, executive referral. Meanwhile, the people actually doing the work were systematically underpaid. Senior manufacturing analyst with 12 years experience, $62,000. Lead operations specialist with 15 years, $64,000. Production manager who'd personally kept precision audit ready for a decade, $71,000. I printed the spreadsheet. My hands were steady as I folded the pages and slipped them into my jacket. Then I logged out, sat in the empty office for a long moment, and made a decision that would change everything. I walked straight to HR. The Human Resources Department was on the second floor, all professional polish and motivational posters about excellence and teamwork. The director was Patricia Williams, early 50s, the kind of corporate polish that comes from decades of managing problems without making waves. Her office door was open. I need to discuss a compensation issue, I said, cutting through her greeting. Her smile faltered. Of course, please sit down. I sat, pulled the printed spreadsheet from my jacket and placed it on her desk. The pages were folded so only the relevant rows were visible, mine and Lucas, side by side. I accidentally accessed this file while searching for production data, I said, keeping my voice level. I'd like an explanation for why someone hired a week before me with zero relevant experience and the same job level is being paid 25% more than I am. Patricia's eyes dropped to the paper. For a fraction of a second, her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She went very still, like someone who'd just realized they were standing in a minefield. "Nicholas," she said slowly, "this document contains confidential personnel information that you shouldn't have access to." "I understand that," I said. "It was accidental, but now that I've seen it, I need you to explain how this compensation structure is anything other than discrimination." Silence stretched between us. Patricia folded her hands on her desk, her expression shifting from warm to professionally distant. "Compensation decisions at Precision are based on multiple complex factors," she said, each word precise and rehearsed. "Market conditions, role complexity, projected growth trajectory, strategic organizational value, individual negotiation outcomes. There are nuances that can't be understood by reviewing isolated data points." "Lucas Morrison is listed as having 0 years of relevant experience," I said flatly. "He has the same job level as me. I have 22 years in manufacturing operations. What nuances justify paying him 25% more?" Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not at liberty to discuss another employee's compensation details with you. That would violate confidentiality policies. Then let's discuss mine. Was I hired significantly below market rate while the CEO's son, who is fundamentally unqualified for this position, was given a premium salary package as an executive referral?" Another pause, longer this time. I could see her weighing options, calculating risks like a general planning troop movements. "Nicholas, I understand this might feel inequitable from your perspective," she finally said, her voice dropping into something colder. "But Precision operates in a competitive environment. Sometimes attracting what we consider high-potential talent requires offering premium packages that reflect future value rather than current experience." "High-potential talent," I repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling nepotism now?" Her expression hardened completely, the professional warmth evaporating like water on hot asphalt. "I think we're done here, Nicholas. You've been with Precision for exactly 10 days. I suggest you focus on learning your responsibilities rather than concerning yourself with compensation strategy decisions that are well above your level." She stood and walked to her office door, opening it. The dismissal was unmistakable. "You have 2 choices," she added quietly. "Accept the position you agreed to when you signed your employment contract, or resign. Those are your options." I stood slowly, meeting her eyes directly. "Understood," I said. Then I walked out. But as I left her office, my heart pounding and my thoughts crystallizing into something clearer than anger, I realized something important. She was wrong. I had a third option. The Army taught me that when you're facing a superior force, you don't attack head-on. You gather intelligence, plan your strategy, and strike where they least expect it. Patricia Williams had just made a critical tactical error. She'd underestimated her enemy. That night, I sat in my apartment and started building a case. Not a legal case, not yet, an intelligence dossier. I opened my laptop, pulled up the compensation spreadsheet I'd saved to my personal cloud storage, and started cross-referencing every single name on that list. LinkedIn profiles, company bios, industry salary surveys, professional certification databases, educational background verification. The deeper I dug, the more damning the pattern became. This wasn't just about Lucas Morrison. This was systematic. Every executive's relative who'd graduated in the last 18 months with degrees in unrelated fields had been placed in inflated roles with salaries that would make industry veterans sick. Lucas Morrison, $85,000 for zero relevant experience. Amanda Foster, $72,000 for a junior analyst position, daughter of the VP of Business Development. Ryan Coleman, $78,000 as an associate supervisor, nephew of my supervisor Stephen. Meanwhile, the people actually running the production floor, the ones who understood throughput optimization and statistical process control, were systematically underpaid. It wasn't just unfair, it was systematic wage suppression disguised as strategic compensation planning. Precision had built an operational model on underpaying loyal, experienced employees while funneling inflated salaries to unqualified relatives of executives. They were counting on people being too afraid, too tired, or too grateful to have jobs to speak up. They were counting on silence. By 2 a.m., I had compiled a comprehensive intelligence report, 28 pages, single-spaced, professionally formatted. Employee names, titles, salary comparisons, industry benchmark data. I created charts showing the salary gap between nepotism hires and merit-based employees. I highlighted specific examples where someone with 18 months of experience was making more than a 15-year veteran. At the top, I wrote in bold, Precision Components Inc., a comprehensive analysis of nepotistic hiring practices and systematic wage discrimination. Then I printed 5 copies, one for Harold Morrison, the CEO, one for my personal records, one for the Department of Labor, one for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and one for every single employee in the building. The next morning, I woke up at 4:15 without an alarm, just adrenaline and absolute clarity of purpose. I showered, dressed in my best clothes, and drove to Precision's facility while the sky was still dark. The parking lot was empty except for vehicles belonging to the overnight cleaning crew. I badged into the building, moving with the kind of purposeful calm the Army had drilled into me during night operations. The security guard, Ronald Anderson, barely glanced up from his paperback novel as I walked past the front desk. "Early start, Nick," he said. "Big project deadline," I replied, keeping my voice casual. I took the elevator to the executive floor. Harold Morrison's office was at the end of the hallway, behind double doors with his name engraved on brushed steel. I tried the handle. Locked, as expected. But I knew Helen Thompson, his executive assistant, kept emergency keys in her desk for urgent deliveries. I'd seen her use them during my first week when Stephen needed to drop off time-sensitive documents. The assistant's area was dark and quiet. I moved carefully, feeling for the desk drawer in the dim light filtering through the hallway windows. The drawer slid open silently. The keyring sat exactly where I remembered, each key labeled clearly in Helen's precise handwriting. I took the key marked CEO Office, unlocked the double doors, and stepped inside Harold Morrison's domain. The office was exactly what you'd expect from someone who valued appearance over substance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lancaster's industrial district. Leather furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. A desk so pristine and carefully arranged it looked like a museum display. Family photographs lined the credenza. Harold with his wife at charity events, Harold shaking hands with local politicians, Harold and Lucas at what looked like a college graduation ceremony. I walked across the expensive carpet, my footsteps completely silent, and placed a sealed manila envelope directly in the center of his desk. Plain, unmarked, except for my name written neatly on the outside in black ink. No dramatic note, no explanation, just the 28-page intelligence report. Then I turned around, locked the doors behind me, returned the key to Helen's drawer, and left the executive floor exactly as I'd found it. But I didn't go home. I went back to my desk on the 3rd floor, logged into my workstation, and opened my email. The real operation was just beginning. I pulled up Precision's company directory. All 280 employees from entry-level administrative staff to senior executives. I started a new message and began adding every single person to the recipient line. Names I recognized, names I was still learning, people from departments I'd never even visited. The subject line read, Compensation Transparency Report, What Precision Doesn't Want You to Know. I attached the complete 28-page report and wrote a brief, direct message. Colleagues, you deserve to know what you're worth. You deserve to know what the people working beside you are being paid. Precision Components has built its success on your expertise, your long hours, and your dedication. Meanwhile, it has systematically underpaid experienced employees while rewarding family connections over qualifications. Attached is a detailed analysis of Precision's compensation structure, including comparisons to industry standards and documentation of significant disparities between merit-based hires and nepotistic placements. Read it. Share it. Decide for yourself what it means. Nicholas Patterson, Senior Operations Manager. My finger hovered over the send button. In the military, we called this the point of no return, the moment when you commit to an operation with full knowledge that there's no going back. Once this email left my outbox, everything would change. For me, for Precision, for every person whose name was on that recipient list. I thought about my kids, about the custody arrangement that depended on my having stable employment. I thought about my ex-wife's warnings about my inability to just keep your head down and do your job. I thought about the comfortable fiction most workplaces maintained, that hard work and loyalty eventually got rewarded, that the system was fundamentally fair even if it was sometimes slow. Then I thought about the young engineers I'd been training, bright kids who believed they were starting careers at a company that valued merit. I thought about the production workers who'd been grinding through 12-hour shifts for years, believing their experience mattered. I thought about every email I'd received over the past 2 weeks from colleagues asking for help with problems that Lucas Morrison should have been solving himself. The Army taught me that sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. This wasn't even a close call. I clicked send. The email left my outbox with a soft, final sound that seemed to echo in the quiet office. 280 copies of the truth, heading to 280 different inboxes, carrying 28 pages of documented evidence that would detonate the comfortable lies Precision had been selling its employees. I leaned back in my chair, hands steady, heart calm, and waited for the storm to begin. It didn't take long. At 7:30, the first employees started arriving for the day shift. By 7:45, I could hear voices in the hallway, excited conversations, people calling out to each other across the office floor. By 8 o'clock, my inbox had started filling with replies. Is this data accurate? Holy shit, Nick. This explains everything. I'm sharing this with my wife. She's not going to believe it. How did you get access to this information? By 8:15, people were standing in hallways with their phones out, reading the report, voices rising in disbelief and anger. Someone had printed sections of it and taped them to the wall outside the main break room. A crowd was gathering, pointing at specific salary figures, taking photos. Look at Lucas's number. He's been here 3 weeks. Amanda's making more than Jim, and he's been here 8 years. This has to be illegal, right? This has to be against some kind of law. The energy in the building was electric, dangerous. Like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air pressure drops and you can feel lightning building in the clouds. People who'd been quietly accepting their situations for years were suddenly seeing the whole picture, understanding exactly how the game had been rigged against them. At 8:42, Harold Morrison's BMW pulled into the executive parking space outside the main entrance. I know the exact time because I was watching from my desk window, waiting to see his reaction when he found my envelope. His voice echoed down the third-floor hallway less than 10 minutes later, sharp and furious, carrying the kind of rage that comes from someone whose carefully constructed world has just been blown apart. Who the hell authorized this? Patricia, get up here right now. Stephen, conference room immediately. Find out how this happened, and find out now. The hunt was beginning. By 9:15, the chaos had spread to every floor of the building, people clustering around computer screens, forwarding the email to personal addresses, making copies on every printer and copy machine in the facility. The manufacturing floor had practically shut down as workers gathered in small groups, discussing numbers, sharing stories about promotions they'd been passed over for, raises that never materialized. At 9:28, my desk phone rang. Internal extension, executive assistant. Mr. Patterson, you're required to report to Executive Conference Room 5 immediately. On my way, I said calmly. I straightened my tie, picked up my jacket, and walked toward the elevator. The ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual, but my hands were steady, my breathing even. 8 years of military service had taught me how to stay calm under pressure. 22 years in manufacturing had taught me how to deal with management. That thought intimidation was a leadership strategy. I was ready for this fight. I walked to Conference Room 5 and opened the door. 6 people were waiting inside, arranged like a tribunal ready to pass judgment. Harold Morrison sat at the head of the table, late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, face red with barely controlled rage. Patricia Williams gripped a leather portfolio like it was a lifeline, her usual professional composure cracked and showing something close to panic underneath. Lucas Morrison sat to one side, looking confused and deeply uncomfortable, like he'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. Stephen Rodriguez was there too, sitting apart from the others with an expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between concern and resignation. 2 men I didn't recognize flanked, Harold in dark suits with leather briefcases, lawyers, obviously, and Helen Thompson sat near the door with a laptop open, presumably to document whatever was about to happen. Nobody invited me to sit down. Harold didn't waste time on pleasantries. What the hell do you think you're doing? Providing transparency, I said calmly, my military bearing kicking in automatically. In the Army, you learn to stay composed when superior officers were losing their minds. You stole confidential company data, Harold said, his voice tight and controlled but vibrating with fury. I accessed a file that was improperly stored in a shared network directory, I replied. I documented factual, verifiable information about compensation practices that your employees have both a legal and ethical right to understand. You have no right. I have every right, I interrupted, my voice still calm but harder now. And unless you want this report forwarded to the Department of Labor, the EEOC, the SEC, every business, publication in Pennsylvania, and every single one of your federal contract administrators who would be very interested to learn how a company holding government contracts systematically discriminates in compensation practices, I suggest you sit down and listen to what I have to say. Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air has been sucked out of the room. Harold's face went from red to a deep, dangerous purple, but he sat down slowly, deliberately, his hands gripping the edge of the conference table. One of the lawyers leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, you're in clear violation. I'm in violation of nothing, I said, cutting him off cleanly. I accessed data I had system permissions to view. I documented factual compensation information. I shared that information internally with other employees. If you want to argue that transparency itself is a fireable offense, go ahead and try, but I'll make sure every employment attorney in Pennsylvania hears about it by this afternoon. The lawyer's mouth closed. Harold's hands were trembling slightly where they gripped the table. What do you want? Harold said through clenched teeth. I want you to fix it, I said simply. Fix what? Everything. Market rate salary corrections for every experienced employee who's been systematically underpaid. Retroactive back pay calculated over the last 3 fiscal years. Transparent, publicly posted salary bands going forward. An external third-party audit of all compensation practices conducted by an independent firm, and a formal written policy explicitly prohibiting nepotistic hiring and requiring documented justification for any compensation decisions that deviate significantly from market standards. One of the lawyers started to object. I held up my hand, palm out. Or, I said, loud enough to cut through the room, I walk out of this building right now, take this report directly to the Lancaster Intelligencer, post the complete analysis on LinkedIn, file formal complaints with the Department of Labor and EEOC, and let your investors, your board of directors, and your federal contract officers decide how they feel about a manufacturing firm that pays the CEO's unqualified son 25% more than a senior manager with 22 years of documented experience. The room went utterly still. Harold stared at me like I'd just set his office on fire. Patricia looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Lucas looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. Finally, Harold spoke, his voice quiet and dangerous. You've been here 2 weeks and you think you can walk into my company and blow up everything I've built? I didn't blow up anything, I said evenly. You built this system. You created these practices. You approved these compensation packages. I just turned on the lights so people could see what was happening. You're fired, Harold said flatly. Perfect, I replied immediately. I'll add wrongful termination and retaliation to the formal complaints I'm filing this afternoon. Should make for a very interesting discovery process during litigation. Harold's jaw worked silently, teeth grinding. Patricia leaned over and whispered something urgent in his ear. Her face had gone from pale to almost gray. Harold closed his eyes. When he opened them again, some of the fight had drained out, replaced by cold calculation. We'll review the compensation structure, he said slowly, each word sounding like it physically hurt to produce. Internally. Confidentially. This stays inside these walls. That depends, I said, on how comprehensive your corrections are and how honestly they're implemented. I stood up, picked up my jacket, and looked directly at Lucas. For what it's worth, this isn't personal. You didn't set your own salary, but you also didn't earn it. And somewhere along the way, someone should have told you that accepting opportunities you haven't qualified for comes with consequences. Lucas said nothing. He just stared at the table, face flushed with shame or anger or some combination I couldn't identify. I walked to the door, opened it, and paused without turning around. You have 72 hours. After that, everything goes public. Then I walked out, letting the door close with a soft, final click behind me. Behind me, I heard Harold Morrison slam his fist into the conference table so hard the sound echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. But I didn't look back. By 11:30, my company-wide email had been forwarded to external contacts, former colleagues, industry peers, friends in adjacent sectors. By 2:15, a business reporter from the Lancaster Intelligencer reached out via LinkedIn, asking if I'd be willing to provide comment on allegations regarding compensation practices at Precision Components. By 4:45, Precision's board of directors had called an emergency closed-door session, and by 6:30, a new company-wide email went out, not from Harold, but from the board's interim chairman, effective immediately. Precision Components is conducting a comprehensive third-party audit of all compensation structures across the organization. All employees will be contacted individually within the next 96 hours regarding adjustments, corrections, and retroactive back pay where applicable. We are committed to transparency, equity, and fair treatment of all team members regardless of tenure, background, or personal relationships. I read it twice, sitting in my truck in the parking lot. Then I went home and started job hunting. 3 weeks later, I got a text from Steven Rodriguez. "Nick, salary corrections went through yesterday. Back pay hit accounts this morning. People are emotional. Several broke down crying when they saw the numbers. You changed lives here. Thank you." 2 hours after that, another message. "Lucas resigned last week. Board gave him an ultimatum. Resign voluntarily or be terminated for cause related to misrepresentation of qualifications." He took the first option. Word is he's working at his father's construction company now. And then that evening, a final message from someone whose name I didn't recognize, but whose email signature identified her as a senior financial controller. Harold Morrison stepped down as CEO this afternoon. Board cited governance failures and accountability issues. Patricia Williams was also asked to resign. Thought you'd want to know. You actually did it. You actually changed everything. I read all 3 messages sitting on my couch, laptop open, job search sites glowing on the screen. Then I closed the computer, leaned back, and smiled. Not because I'd won some corporate battle, but because I'd finally stopped accepting a system that valued the wrong things. 4 months later, I accepted a position at a competitor. They'd reached out after reading about the Precision transparency incident in industry publications. The compensation package was $89,000, 31% higher than what Precision had originally offered me. Not because of my last name, because of my experience. On my first day, the plant manager shook my hand and said something I'll never forget. "We don't hire people based on who they're related to. We hire them based on what they can do. And from everything I've seen, you're exactly the kind of person who makes organizations better just by refusing to accept mediocrity." That's all I ever wanted. Sometimes a system doesn't change because people ask nicely or file quiet complaints that disappear into HR filing cabinets. It changes because someone finally refuses to stay quiet. The military taught me that sometimes you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. 2 weeks into that job, they told me to accept their broken system or leave. I chose neither. I forced them to face what they'd built. And when they tried to bury the truth, I made sure everyone could see it. The envelope that sat on my desk that morning contained more than just printed pages. It contained proof that experience matters, that fairness is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the best way to protect the people around you is to refuse to stay silent when you discover the truth.